How's it going, everyone? This is the Anime Man. Ah yes! It is time, ladies and gentlemen, that I go back on my cultural research BS for the greater good of the internet. It's no surprise to my audience now that I am a seasoned connoisseur of taste, aka I know my shit when it comes to the Japanese adult animation medium known colloquially as Hnti. But with today's video, I decide that it is time for me to finally take that extra step forward to really secure my place here on the internet as the man who spits facts and knowledge about Japanese animated smut. The Anime Man is dead, ladies and gentlemen, because now we are fully immersing ourselves into the new age movement of the henty kid. Because if I'm gonna spend this much time to unironically go and do some hardcore research into this current topic of today's video, then you bet your ass that I deserve this place. And trust me, my boys, the amount of research that went into this video was an absolute mission. Was it worth it? I really hope so. Now, if you are over the respectful age of 18, which all of you should be if you are watching this video, that is what my lawyer said that I should say to all of you, you probably stumbled upon a few animated smart series out there. Some old, some new, some pretty vanilla, and some that are just so disturbing that you didn't quite realize that humanity could stoop to a level so low. Like, I'm talking so low that it makes the Seven Circles of Hell look like a new and revamped version of Disneyland. Like, Satan walked through the door and was like,
Even that's fucked up for me.
Either way, there is a lot of stuff like that out on the internet, and I've spent a pretty good amount of my time kind of venturing through those sweaty swamps for the sake of culture. But you see, this is one part of my personality among many parts of my personality that I genuinely regret, because it honestly just wastes a lot of my time for no discernible reason. Because I've always just wanted to know the answer to one simple question. What was the first henty ever made? Just recently I found the worst henty ever made, or I guess the worst rated henty ever made, and if you saw that video, that was a roller coaster and a half, wasn't it? But if you haven't seen that video, boom, there it is on the screen right now. I highly implore you to go check it out, because it has recently become one of my favorite videos that I've ever made. But never mind that one. Which one started it all? What series was responsible for the conception process that gave us all of these beautiful cultured memes and material that us otakus just slurp up on a daily? Well, that's what I plan to do in today's video. But before that, let me do a quick little mention of today's sponsor. Because this video is proudly sponsored by the lovely folks over at Bookwalker, doing an awesome collab with the lovely folks over at Faku. That's right, because we're living in a time right now where you can go over to Bookwalker, an awesome service where you can buy digital, fully legal, fully English translated manga and light novel series and purchase Faku approved doujins straight onto your favorite device. What a world we live in, thank you Jesus. There are only a handful of series right now in the Bookwalker and Faku library. One of those series I'll be talking about later in the video, but more series may be on its way. So if you're interested in that and want to support the industry and your boy, especially your boy, because knowing how YouTube works in 2020, I ain't making a cent off of this goddamn video, then make sure to stick around until the end of the video. Before we start diving into the origins of hentai, we should probably cover a very, very brief history of animated smut, how the idea of pornography even came about in Japanese history and Japanese culture. Because weirdly enough, although a lot of people love to make memes and crack jokes about hentai, just be like, oh, it's funny, isn't it? Anime boobs, horny on main. There is actually quite a bit of cultural and historical significance, especially when we go back to the roots of it in Japanese history. But this is no good. We're about to do an educational video for the culture, for the research purposes, and I'm not dressed in my proper attire. I need to dress for the occasion. Hi there, I'm Professor Plenty O Hnti, here to give you the goods. Believe it or not, as trivial and meme-driven as the whole Hnti thing is, it's actually quite heavily rooted in Japanese culture and Japanese history. Now, of course, I'm just going to cover the basics here, but if you'd like me to go more into an in-depth culture and history, like a history of Hnti 101 kind of thing, then make sure to fucking smash that motherfucking like button. But for now, here's a crash course. Before Westerners came around and coined the now more commonly used H word, there existed a form of Japanese art called shunga, which is thought to date back to around the Heian period. The most famous of these shungas was a work called The Dream of the Fisherman's Wife, or Takotama, made in 1814 by Katsushika Hokusai. Yeah, you know this painting that you've probably seen as like a wall scroll sold at like some kind of anime convention? Yeah, he made that. However, between the 16th and 19th century, all risque material was banned by the shogun because he was a beta male cuck. And ultimately, shunga was completely abandoned with the invention of pornographic photographs in the late 19th century. Lesson over. Now, you might be thinking, out of all of this, where does the animated stuff come into play? Well, we know from a previous video of mine that the first actual all-ages anime that was ever made, that was officially recognized as an anime, was ℌắℍ𝔫𝔱ằ, made in 1917, and I've made a full video on that if you'd like to check it out right here. But other than that, regular televised all-ages anime started from around the late 50s, early 60s, especially with the success of Astro Boy. So most people would probably make the assumption that the adult kind of stuff probably originated around the 60s, maybe the 70s. But this is where you are very wrong, my students. This is why I'm the professor teaching you the culture. Turns out that the oldest hentai ever made actually dates all the way back to 1932. That's right, the roaring 30s, baby! While the US was going through the Great Depression, Japan was going through the Great Erection. Crazier still to think about is the fact that this first hentai that was ever made was only made 15 years after the first anime ever made. That's kind of insane to think about. That's like going from first base to third base in a matter of like 15 minutes. The Japanese animation industry is a fast-moving relationship, and the title of that legendary first hentai is Suzumibune. Now, the show itself isn't all that particularly interesting. Much like ℌắℍ𝔫𝔱ằ, it's based in the Edo period. It is a old-styled Edo period schmexy times. Just think of ℌắℍ𝔫𝔸ℚ, but with a lot of schmecks involved, essentially. But what is kind of cool is the mystery surrounding not so much the work itself, but around the creator, Kimura Hakusan. In that, other than the name and the filmography under that name, the origins and background of this creator of the first hentai ever made is pretty much a mystery. There are no remaining photos, interviews, personal records. Hell, we don't even know if Kimura Hakusan was even a boy or a girl. The only thing that we know is that they are credited under the name Kimura Hakusan, and that they were an animation creator from around the 20s and 30s, and most likely was the mastermind, the big brain boy or girl that created the first hentai ever made. So we've done it. We've found the first hentai ever made. What are we waiting for? Let's play it on, let's put it on the reel, check it out, and give it a review. Is what I would normally say at this point in the video. Unfortunately, not a whole lot is known about this particular work, and for the longest time, historians and researchers weren't even sure if a physical copy of this first hentai ever made even existed anymore. That is, of course, until it was rediscovered in early 2017. The only known physical copy of it now rests deep within the secret vaults of Tokyo's National Film Archive of Japan. And because of its extremely precious age, nature, and cultural significance, the museum has pretty much agreed to never broadcast or never air publicly this hentai for anybody ever. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. In other words, the first hentai ever made is not even allowed to be viewed publicly by anyone ever. It is essentially a lost piece of medium. But my lovely students, do you also realize the moral of this particular story? Historians and researchers are literally disallowing the airing of the first hentai ever made for cultural research purposes. For cultural research purposes. The memes have made a full circle. Life makes sense now. But damn, that sucks, you might be thinking to yourself. We found the first hentai ever made, and yet we can't see it. We can't even show any photos. I tried to look online for any photos whatsoever, and I couldn't find anything. This thing is so hidden away and is so precious to Japanese cultural anthropology and history that it is practically impossible for me to show you this first hentai ever made. So just for the sake of this video and our viewing privileges, let's just slightly give a twist to the question in the title and see what other acceptable answers we can find for it. To start with, let's talk about the first official hentai manga that was ever made, which I feel is a little bit difficult to define considering that that topic isn't as solidly rooted in its definition compared to the first hentai anime that was ever made. But there are notably two series that are credited by many hentai fans and researchers and historians as being the first hentai manga that was ever made. The first of which is the ℌℌ series. Written in 1979 by ℌ𝔫𝔱ằ, it was not only the first adult manga to be published commercially, but was also known as the first lolicon-based adult manga ever made. In fact, more people recognize the ℌℌ series as the first lolicon manga ever made versus the first hentai manga ever made, so much so that the creator ℌ𝔫𝔱� is colloquially known in the researcher and historian world as the father of lolicon. Not sure if that's exactly an amazing name that you want to leave your legacy under, but considering the fact that this man died at the age of 69 goes to show that he was definitely dedicated as fuck to his craft. The other manga that is often credited as being the first hentai manga is a little more well-known, a little more famous. In fact, I'm sure there's a lot of you guys who have at least heard of the name of it, and that is this one right here. ℌ𝔫𝔱�. First serialized in 1986 by Maeda Toshio, it is not only the first erotic manga to popularize the tentacle trope, but was also the first to popularize erotic manga in the Western market, predominantly in the United States. I've genuinely been wanting to talk about ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 for the longest time in a video, and I'm glad I've finally gotten the excuse to talk about it because, again, not only does it have cultural and historical significance when it comes to the brooding world of hentai in the 80s, but it's also genuinely a really good manga. Unlike most modern day doujins that tack on a story onto the sexual underlay, ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 incorporates a really ominous dark fantasy and supernatural setting, whilst also providing an array of different lewd scenes, of course. Not to say that other modern cultured manga don't also follow this type of storytelling, but ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 has a really unsettling vibe to its lewdness. I wouldn't exactly label this series as an eroguro, considering that the ero scenes very rarely intermingle with the guro scenes. But its horror supernatural narrative and creepy Ito Junji-esque art style makes ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 a rather difficult series to fap to. I also do find it fascinating that this series is known as that one series that popularized the whole tentacle trope, when in actuality, you actually read ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 from start to finish and you realize very quickly that there isn't a whole lot of tentacles in it. Unlike the octopus tentacles that most people recognize the whole tentacle trope under and was what was originated in the Takoto Amashunga that I mentioned earlier in the video, in ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 it's not so much a tentacle like this, but more of a long tongue, a long appendage coming out of the mouth that just so happens to be shaped like a willy. But funnily enough, there are also other tropes that ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 dabbles in, like kemono mimi, threesome, and even a little bit of futanari at times. So I think it's safe to say that ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 didn't just do the whole tentacle trope justice and really bring it out into the forefront, especially in the Western market, but it also dabbled in pretty much every tag that you would ever find on Fuck. Now, compared to its original manga counterpart, the numerous anime adaptations of ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 deviate quite a bit from its source material, adding new tropes and elements that are considered a little more controversial, like sadomasochism and RAPE, making it more of a legit eroguro series. But at least in terms of the manga, it focuses its lewd content on more tamer, quote-unquote, vanilla elements, so rest assured you won't be caught reading some seriously messed up stuff. Unless, of course, you've never read hentai manga in your life ever, or you're below the age that you should be reading it, in which case I wouldn't recommend it. Also, why are you watching this video? Now, many people are very quick to say that the ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 anime was the first hentai anime to really make it big, and that's where you're wrong, son. Because the first iteration of the ℌ𝔫𝔫𝔼 anime was released in 1989, just 3 years after the beginning of the serialization of the manga. However, before 1989, there were two series that were released that are more referenced as being the first hentai anime ever, or at least, you know, the first hentai anime that we knew the existence of. The first of which is simply titled Lolita anime. If I wasn't on thin ice with the YouTube gods this far into the video, this one is definitely going to bring the hammer down on your boy. Released in 1984 and based on a manga by Nakajima Fumio, Lolita anime is considered to be the first officially recognized hentai OVA to ever be released commercially to the public. As if you couldn't tell from the title of the damn thing, it focuses on such lovely, family-friendly genres as Yuri, BDSM, and of course, the good old lolicon. Kind of interesting to think that the first hentai anime that was ever made isn't as vanilla as most people make it out to be. While the art style and animation style hasn't exactly aged all that amazingly, its lewdness and raunchiness is at a level that can very easily match up to some of the modern classics of today. So if you're curious enough to go check it out for yourself, there's my warning. I watched all 8 episodes of it, and while it didn't get me all that excited, it was a fascinating experience in that I got to essentially watch the oldest hentai anime that we're allowed to actually consume. Yeah, I've really gotten to that point in my life where I actually watch hentai for like actual research purposes. I hope my parents are proud of me. But Joey, you might be thinking to yourself, that isn't technically the first hentai anime ever made. I've never even heard of it. Nobody's heard of it, therefore, does it technically even count as the first hentai anime ever made? And honestly, you are right. Like, I could technically argue that Namakura ga Otana made in 1917 is technically the first anime ever made, but if I didn't make that video on it back in the day, I doubt that any of you guys watching this video right now would even know its existence. Even people who aren't that heavily deep into the whole history of anime and stuff like that know that usually the most accepted answer for the first anime ever made is Astro Boy in the early 60s. Because it was not only the first properly televised anime ever made, but also really put the word anime on the map, both domestically and internationally. So in that vein, let's talk about the other series that is more credited as the first hentai anime ever made, because it was a lot more commercially successful than the aforementioned Lolita anime series, and also really started a number of different booms in both Japan and in the West. Let's talk about the Cream Lemon series. Also released in 1984, just months after the release of the aforementioned Lolita anime series, the commercial success of Cream Lemon is considered by many to be the catalyst for the popularity of OVAs in the anime world, as well as a huge reason behind the massive bishoujo boom of the 1980s. Yes, you heard me correctly, my students. This over 30-year-old Yuri incest lolly hentai anime made so much of a history in the anime and hentai world, and is probably a large reason why people like you and me and everybody else watching this video have these things that we call waifus. God bless Japan! The animation and storytelling is surprisingly decent for a 30-year-old hentai, and can even stand in comparison to the quality of some modern hentai, especially when it comes to the latter. Although, yes, there's a crapload of schmexing in every episode as expected, they also managed to weave in some pretty decent character dynamics and development to make the intimacy that much more close combat. Am I saying that you can invite your boys over and turn this on and all fap to it? I mean, it could make for a great challenge video, but other than that, I wouldn't really recommend it. But it still wasn't the most horrible thing I'd ever watched. I mean, I already did that in a video, so suffice it to say, some of you cultured ladies and gentlemen out there could probably appreciate this one a lot more. So with all that being said, I hope that with this video I was able to at least show you guys just a tiny little snippet of the history of hentai. Regardless of what we identify as the first true hentai ever made, it's kind of cool to look back on the history of it, how it evolved, how it essentially became to be this now meme-driven, jokingly crazy phenomenon and subculture that the internet just loves to make fun of. And hopefully I've at least enlightened some of you more uncultured motherfuckers watching this video that yes, all jokes aside, hentai really does have historical significance and cultural significance in both animation and censorship in Japan. Fuck yeah! Science! But more importantly, y'all should go check out the Bookwalker and Faku collab that is, again, the proud sponsor of today's video. Get a bunch of fully English translated Faku and industry approved doujins like the aforementioned Urotsuki Doji and many, many more. It already comes at an affordable price, but just for you lovely cultured ladies and gentlemen who stuck around until the very end of this video, you can use my coupon code TheAnimeMan to get $5 off your purchase. Every single person who uses that coupon code helps your boy out a lot, because trust me, again, there is no fucking way I'm getting ads on this video, so help a brother out during this pandemic. But not only that, using the coupon and buying the doujins from Bookwalker also supports the industry, both over at Bookwalker and also over at Faku. So everybody wins. So if you'd like to get on that shit right now and want to use my coupon code to get that great percentage off, then make sure to go down to that first link down in the description below. But guys, let me know if you learned anything new in this video, and also if there is another NSFW topic that you'd like me to cover more extensively in videos like this. If you'd like Professor whatever the fuck I gave this character to be back on screen, then make sure to give me your suggestions either down in the comments below, or if you'd like to be actually heard and would like to possibly participate in the next one that is coming up, then make sure to follow your boy over on Twitter. You should also follow me on Twitter, because that's where I like a crap load of anime lewds and follow a bunch of awesome hentai artists and illustrators that definitely deserve the attention and support for the amazingly cultured talent that they have. So again, thank you to Bookwalker and Faku for sponsoring today's video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Like and favorite if you enjoyed, subscribe for more anime banter, keep watching anime. Johnny!